Hey everybody, Matt Johnston, and I'm back with another in our video series on commercial leases. This particular video is going to deal with insurance coverage that the tenant is going to require. Before we get started, I would really appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button that you see down below, and also click that bell. That bell tells you when we have new content that is available, both for the commercial lease project and for any of the other videos that we put out. So let's talk about insurance. Insurance is pretty common. It's a requirement in every lease that I've ever seen. So there's two kinds of insurance, and we've already talked a little bit about the triple net insurance that's required. That's you are going to be paying the landlord for a certain percentage, a pro rata share of the landlord's insurance on the whole building or the whole facility. But the lease will also contain the kinds of insurance protection that you, the tenant, are going to have. And this will range from basic things like workers' compensation. So if you have more than one employee, you are required by law to have workers' compensation. If you may also have other things that may be required. Almost every lease is going to require some sort of general public liability insurance, or what is referred to as premises liability. So this is if somebody comes in and slips and falls in your facility, landlord's going to require that you have insurance to cover that. You're often also going to see fire insurance. Now, sometimes a premises liability insurance policy will put all of that together. So you'll have premises and fire all in one, but sometimes they're separate. And those are policies that you would go and get from an insurance broker, and they're going to be based upon some level of minimum coverage. That minimum coverage might be anywhere from a minimum of $500,000 to a couple of $1 million minimum coverage. Now, obviously, you can exceed that coverage limit if you like, but the landlord will require minimum coverage in a certain amount. There may also be some other specialty insurances that may be required, particularly if you are dealing with, say, specialized equipment, or you are dealing with vehicles, or you're dealing with something that is slightly unusual in terms of a business. You may be required to have additional insurances. Now, the landlord is going to require that you also cover the landlord. And this is done by obtaining a certificate of insurance. All you have to do is call your insurance broker, they'll get you one. And it makes sure that the landlord is named as what's called an additional insured, meaning it's another party that's going to be protected by your insurance policy. It's pretty standard, and you shouldn't freak out about it. It usually doesn't cost you anything, or if it does, it costs you a few bucks. And you may be required from time to time to show proof of insurance. Some leases will also have a provision that says that if there's a cancellation of the policy, for example, for non-payment, that the landlord receive notification, which means you have to tell your insurance company that if this policy is terminated or canceled for any reason, not only do you have to notify me, the person who failed to pay the policy or canceled the policy, but you also have to notify the landlord. Now, that seems really sort of getting all up in your business type of thing, but the landlord is carrying an enormous level of risk by having multiple tenants in a building. Those risks include loss not only to your space, but to other spaces within the building. So if you have a neighbor in the suite next door and there's a fire in your facility, in your space, it could affect the space next door. And if you don't have insurance, the landlord's covering that. The landlord's not going to be happy. So yes, having these sort of notices, having these sorts of certificates of insurance are kind of intrusive in a way, but it is just providing a security blanket to the landlord. So be sure you read through what policy requirements are needed, what insurance coverages are needed, and also what happens if there's increases or changes in your policy requirements. Sometimes the landlord may require an additional increase in policy requirements, and you want to make sure that you have sufficient notice that that policy requirement is going to come in. So let's say The landlord says, well, we no longer want $2 million in minimum coverage, we want $3 million. Well, increasing your coverage from $2 million to $3 million means an increase in your premium. You want to have some notice of what that's going to be. You also want to avoid having to pay a large increase at any one time. So you want to have the ability to sort of negotiate with the landlord a little bit. And that's part of the notice requirement. Okay. In the meantime, we hope you're enjoying these series. If you want to hear more, if there's some questions that you have, please don't hesitate to reach out, and you can email us. I'm going to include my email address in the show notes, and then you can also schedule a consultation with us as well if you want us to review your commercial lease. In the meantime, if you want to see other content, you can click right up here, and if you want to subscribe, and I hope you do, click the button that you see right up there. In the meantime, go out and watch some live soccer. You'll be glad you did. Bye-bye.